All right, my friends, today let's go ahead and learn how to do multiple flips with the kettlebell. Also, more importantly, how to understand how we can do multiple flips. What are the actual variables that go into being able to do more than one rotation in any skill that we do? So a quick reminder for those of you who are new to kettlebell juggling. We have our ways that we can rotate the handle around the bell. These are commonly called our 5 basic flips, although we should call them rotations, our 5 basic rotations. We have our simple, I'm using my 4 fingers to push the handle down. I have my reverse, technically called a reverse simple. I'm using my thumb to go up and over the handle. I have my mug flip, so now the handle is in a vertical orientation and I'm going around, pushing to the outside of my thumb. I have my helicopter, and then I have my oblique flip. Now, if you don't know how to do those flips, I invite you to join my free Kettlebell Juggling course, which can be found below. You'll not only be introduced to those 3 basic flips, the first 3, simple, reverse, and mug flip, but also how to integrate them into lateral patterns, how to start expanding not just your kettlebell juggling skills, but also your movement with the kettlebell, so you can then combine juggling with your expanded movement repertoire together to tap into some really cool flow. So once again, a free course, you can find that below. Now moving on to multiple flips. We have our rotations, 5 basic rotations, and then we have a ton of different ways that we can throw those rotations. For example, I have my simple in front of me, but I can also do that simple in a variety of different ways, laterally, as well as in movements like our mill being the general shape of that movement I just created, that circle. And I can do different rotations in that pattern. Oblique, mug, reverse flip, a bit of an awkward one, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different ways that we can throw each of those rotations. Now here's the thing when it comes to multiple flips. Let's jump right in. There are 2 variables that we have control over and can manipulate in order to increase how many times the handle rotates in the air as we throw, and between when we throw and catch the bell. So those 2 variables are, firstly, speed. This one makes sense, does it not? The faster you spin the handle, the more rotations you're going to be able to do. Now, most people will either rely on one of these variables and not the other, but you get really good at multiple flips and they become so much more efficient and effortless when you combine them together. So in this case, people rely on just ripping that handle to try and get more rotations. That brings us to the second way that we can do multiple flips, the second variable we can control, and that's height. The higher you throw the bell, the more time that bell handle specifically has to rotate in the air. So if I don't change the speed, but I change the height, well, I'm gonna do more flips. Now combining those together, a little bit more spin and a little bit more height is gonna give us exactly what we need. Now right off of the gate, I would like to invite you into a little deeper, intentional way of thinking about multiple flips. There, in every skill we do, if it's a mill or we're flipping in front of us, there is an ideal amount of spin and height that we can choose to use in order to get the most efficient catch, the most efficient execution of 2 flips or 3 flips. Here's what I mean by that. A lot of people, when they start to do, let's say, a double, they'll do far too much spin or far too much height. And so yes, they're doing 2 rotations, but there's a lot of excess speed, a lot of excess height that's not needed. And you get really, really good at kettlebell juggling by continuing to dial in this idea of just enoughness, just enough spin to make a trick happen, just enough height in order to make that trick happen. And this allows you a lot more control over not just that individual skill, but how we connect it to other movements. That will make more sense as you go through your juggling journey, and you can ask me below to expand on it if you'd like. However, back to multiple flips. So I just invite you into thinking about how you can be the most efficient with how much spin and height you're choosing to utilize. Now let's take, for example, all of our flips in front of us. I'm going to use a reverse flip to represent flipping the bell in front of the body from my swing. If I want to do one flip, I can just stay more or less chest height, which is a good way to access that float point and get a nice easy spin up and over of the handle and then catch below. Now, if I wanted to do two flips, there's two ways that I could go about doing that. Three ways, actually. The first one is to not change the height, but to increase the speed of the handle. The second way is to increase the height, but not increase the speed. This is primarily done by getting into the pendulum swing and really focusing on adding that vertical trajectory as you release the bell, which gives you more height, but doesn't necessarily mean that bell travels away from you, which is important. And a clear difference between the pendulum swing versus the hard style swing. Now, the third way that we could choose to do a double flip is by adding a bit of both. I'm going to add a little bit more spin and a little bit more height to give us a very comfortable double rotation. Now, I tend to favor a little more spin over height because in disciplines like classical juggling, where we're connecting a lot of mills and that bell can get quite high as you do more and more flips, by the time you catch and bring that bell around, gravity is pulling it down so much that that bell weighs a lot more than its actual weight. And so to help combat that, you can learn how to spin faster, lower, and so that bell isn't picking up as much pull and weight, which is a really useful thing to have in mind for disciplines like classical juggling in particular, although I think it works just about anywhere. Now, another reason why I like to add a little bit more spin and keep the height to a bit of a minimum is it's just easier to work with. When we add height to the equation, we just have to keep in mind that when we're catching the bell, we're not only catching a faster spinning handle, but we're also now catching a bell that's dropping downwards a little bit more. So you have to take height into more account, which can be a little bit of just an additional something to pay attention to that you might not need to. Here's what I mean. If I'm doing shifting over to a different example, if I'm doing a double behind the back simple catch, like this, a little bit more of an advanced application. I don't usually do a double simple behind the back catch. I'll just do a single, but my point's going to be proven anyways. If you add too much height than is necessary, now we're having to take into account that bell dropping downwards. I need to find that handle dropping down. It's going to weigh more, and it's just going to be more difficult to navigate that catch for a lot of different reasons. And so the way I like to throw, if I were to throw a double simple behind the back catch, I would try and keep it as low as possible, and so I don't have to worry about additional height. That bell is going to weigh the same because it's staying in a similar place as I would throw a single. I'm just going to increase the spin, so it doesn't actually change my catch point. So another application of that. When it comes to mills in particular, throwing simple mills, let's go over those two variables and then how I like to throw mills when I'm doing multiple flips. So if I'm doing a multiple flip, let's do a simple mill on 90, okay, into a lateral simple mill. So simple mill on 90, lateral simple mill. I can do this one with 1 flip, 2 flip, 3 flip, 4 flip, doesn't really matter. What's going to change are those two variables. As I go up in rotations, I'm going to increase the spin speed, which comes from me actively pushing the handle, and I'm going to slightly increase height. Now, what I don't want to do, that a lot of people do, especially with mills, is they focus only on increasing height and not actually increasing spin speed, which then again makes that bell heavier and a little more difficult to catch. Here's what that would look like with 2 flips, and then I'm going to go ahead and do what I would do, which is decrease height, increase spin. So, throwing it high. Okay, I've done my 2 flips, and I'm sure that kettlebell has left the screen because I'm throwing it really high. I still get 2 flips in, the handle is spinning slower, and it's going higher. Now here's how I would actually execute this one. Big difference. So I'm actively pushing the handle more. My catching position stays the same because even though I'm increasing the spin, I'm still going to wait here, and I know that those 2 flips, because I've increased the spin, is going to do 1 rotation, 2 rotation. And as long as I have my hand under the belly of the bell, I know that handle is just going to rotate right in. This is a misconception that a lot of people have with multiple flips. They're much more difficult because you have to figure out when you're catching a very fast spinning handle. And that's actually not the case. Yes, when you throw a multiple flip, that handle is going to move a lot faster, but it shouldn't change how and where you are actually catching the bell. For example, if I do 1 to 3 reverse flips, here's my catch point. Okay, maybe just above chest height or chest height. 2 flips, same. 3 flips, same. If I were to try and slow down time and figure out when that handle has done 3 rotations and then go out and grab it, it's going to be very, very difficult. You're also going to hit your handle a lot, and that's going to suck. So instead, you always know where your catching position is, which is right here. And I know about when 3 flips has happened, and this is what happens when you build up slowly over time. And I'm going to let the handle spin into my hand by keeping it close to the bottom of the bell. So it just rotates right in. Much easier than going for the catch. Now this can be applied to any amount of rotation and any skill. Increase the height or increase the spin. A mix of both is going to be best. Now how do you apply this when you're learning? Most people start with just increasing the rotations of the skills in front of the body. In all of the flips, I'll do some different rotations now. So our helicopter, for example. What you can do to start is just practice engaging the handle with more time with your thumb. What I mean by that is a lot of people when they juggle, when they release the bell, it's only like a flick. So in this case for a helicopter, maybe they're flicking outside. Okay, so 90 degrees outwards. So maximizing your engagement of your thumb with the handle means your thumb is the last part of your body that touches the handle as you're spinning a helicopter, for example. And so instead of flicking to the side, I'm going to push around and through, releasing here. And so because my hand is in contact with the handle more, I can generate more momentum and spin. That kettlebell is going to spin faster. And I can do this without even catching the bell and let it drop. If you're in an environment where you can do that, I would highly recommend doing it. Practice gaining more speed but not catching it. And what you'll find pretty soon is that you're probably spinning it too much, and then you're going to have to dial back down. Remember that the catch stays the same. And I pay a lot of attention to how you're catching the bell in those free tutorials inside the free course, which once again is in the description. It's really important that when you're flipping the bell, your catching hand, which is usually the opposite hand, not all the time, is as close as possible. So there's no space, there's barely any space between the release and catch. That's what too much space looks like. There's way too much opportunity to miss the handle, but if your hand is already literally beside the bell, you can't miss it because that handle is literally turning right into your hand. Same with the simple, same with the mug flip, same with all the other flips. So if we're doing a double flip, we're just going to give it a little bit of space because obviously that handle needs to clear another rotation. But then as soon as we know that that handle has cleared, we come right back in as close as we can to the bell. And that is how we do multiple flips. At the beginning, it can sometimes be easier to throw higher because in that case, we don't have to worry about spinning faster. And so that bell is in a little more slow motion and it's a little easier to see the handle and be able to catch it. Especially for something like a flip in front of the body. Ideally, our simples look like this right here. They don't go any higher. But when I'm first learning, I might do this because you can see how I get to slow down the handle spin as opposed to this, and it makes it a little more digestible at the start. Let me know if you have any questions about multiple flips and how they apply in different scenarios. In summary, there are two variables that we are always manipulating in order to get multiple rotations. Speed, increasing the speed of which we are pushing and manipulating the handle to spin faster. And height, the higher we throw the bell, the more time that bell has to rotate in the air. And control over these two factors not only helps us do multiple flips, but helps us with a range of different skills as we increase our complexity. Every skill ideally has its own combination of speed and height because different skills are traveling different distances, needing to go different heights, either higher or lower, and we get to tap into our own experience juggling and figure that out. What's the most efficient and effortless pathway for me to be able to execute this skill? And I love that process of kettlebell juggling. So once again, if you are looking to start, if you are at the end of this video and you're wanting to now jump into learning how to start kettlebell juggling, check out the free course in my bio below. It's not only a free course with over 18 tutorials, but also has a live class every week, also free, and it is a community, meaning you are getting a free community of other people starting kettlebell juggling. In that community, you have a full free course. Also inside that community, we have a weekly group call where you can ask me questions, get live feedback, etc., etc. So I look forward to seeing you inside. If you are a little more advanced and you are looking to take your skills to the next level, there's no better place in the internet than the Kettlebell Juggling Academy, which is my paid community on the platform school. And right now it's accessible at a very low monthly price. I have my 4 courses inside the Kettlebell Ascension Pathway series, which is a series of 4 courses, building in complexity from absolute foundational skills, learning how to acquaint yourself with your own body, its posture, and then the kettlebell, all the way through moving 3D, learning how to move 3D and multiplanar with the kettlebell into juggling foundations, into more advanced juggling. So you get that, you get 2 classes a week. There's a ton of bonus tutorials and skills, class recordings, monthly seminars, and more in the paid community. Either way, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.